Good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this morning on special edition, the topic is grieving with your host, Betsy Wurtzel, who is the host of Chatting with Betsy. Good morning, Betsy.
Good morning, Lillian. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, trying to stay inside from the heat.
Yes, I agree. And I want to say good morning to everybody out there. And what I'm going to talk about today, Lillian, well, first I want to say thank you for everyone for joining. I'm blowing the lid off of grieving, okay? We need to talk about it. Let's take it out of the closet and into the spotlight where it belongs. And what I'm going to talk about today might offend some people, and that's okay because I'm a Jersey girl. I can take it. I'm going to talk about why do people say to people who are experiencing someone dying or after they have died to say, you have to be strong. Be strong. What? Why? What does that mean, be strong? Because let me tell you something, viewers, listeners. When you're a caregiver for so long, you are strong. You may not think you're strong, but you are strong. And we're not robots, we're human beings. And I felt very insulted, Lillian, and so did Josh. I found it actually quite annoying when people would say to me, be strong. Do they say that because they don't want to see you cry or upset? Or do they think that you have to be strong all the time? Because I want to tell everyone, when you see your loved one deteriorate and suffer and die, you're going to cry. And when I was videoing Matt on his last days, yes, people saw me crying and they said, be strong, tell Josh to be strong. And I really didn't like it when people told Josh to be strong for me or me to be strong for Josh, because Josh has been strong. I have been strong. I went to work with migraines. I went to work being up all night sometimes, pumping out water, Matt hallucinating 3 o'clock in the morning. We are strong, but we're human beings. We have emotions. Why do we have to stifle our emotions? I talk with my hands. I'm from Jersey. Why?
Okay.
When we stifle our emotions, people, you know what's going to happen? You're going to have a nervous breakdown. And I'm not a therapist, so I just want to put that disclaimer out there. You're going to get physically sick because emotional stress will cause you to be sick in some way, form, or fashion. So what do you do when people say to be strong? Well, you know what I felt like saying? I felt like saying, let me see how strong you'll be when this happens to you. Someone called me, a friend of mine called me, her husband's dying. She said, I had to be strong. I said, no, you don't. You do not have to be strong. You want to cry? You cry. You let it out. We're not asking, I said this last week, I'll say it every week. We're not asking people to fix us. We're not asking you to solve the problem. We just want you to listen to us. And I want to quote a poem I made up, Lillian. I guess it's a poem. I don't know what you would call it. I said it at Matt's funeral. People want 2 ears for people to hear us without judgment, a shoulder to cry on, and 2 arms to hug us. That's what we want. We don't need judgment. We don't need to be told you have to be strong. That's old school thinking. And let me tell you something, people. I have a son. We need to start raising our boys to become compassionate men who aren't afraid to show emotion. I'm proud of my son when he says to me, Mom, I went to a wake and I cried. I said, that's okay, Josh. It shows that you have compassion. That's a wonderful quality. Now, I'm not talking about a broken toy, a broken fingernail. I'm talking about real life situations. And let me tell you something, folks. I'm going to get really graphic here. I saw my husband in a body bag. Do you think I could just get that out of my mind like that? No, I can't. Oh, and by the way, Lillian, before I forget, I just want to show everyone a picture of Matt, if anyone could see that. Matt died 7 months ago today, and Friday is his birthday. So we're honoring Matt all week, doing something in his memory. And I just feel very strongly that people need to start accepting other people's feelings. People are looking for validation all the time. Is that, I got to take my glasses off. Oh, that's your husband? That was your
Yeah,
Barry.
that's Barry.
Oh, nice. I'm nearsighted. I can't see with my glasses.
It's okay. Not a problem. I still have a picture of him. Well, I have the one that Ben did too. I just want to say one thing about the Be Strong thing. Life is not a movie. It's not a John Wayne or a Little Women or The Notebook or any of those other people we love watching on the cinema. And it's nice for the character actors to say be strong because let's face it, that's all they had was to be strong. They were in the middle of whatever territory they were deposited in by their now dead defunct husband or their now defunct wife. And they had 8 kids to take care of. And all of a sudden the guy didn't know what to do. That's why they married so many times. So you can't go by what you read in the romance books or in the movies because it's not reality. It's called fiction because it is fiction. And fiction is to magnify the feelings and the intensity of those feelings. I'm a writer, so I know.
Mm-hmm.
To draw in the audience to become sympathetic with your character so they can identify them. You just can't say she cried and expect people to run out and buy your book and make it a bestseller. No, you have to say anguish. She took her handkerchief and held it up to her nose, trying to hold back the stem of tear and sniffling. Doesn't that sound a lot better, folks?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's called being strong. But that's not reality because you still have to go on with your life. You still have to pay the bills. You still have to get the death certificates, which is $20 a pop. Still got to make the arrangements, flowers, and don't try and buy a monumental stone out in the lots or even online because some of those suckers cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I went to a bargain basement one and got a very nice granite red stone for $65. They were having a sale that time. But these are the things you need to do. That's be practical. If they're going to say anything, they need to say that to you. Don't let your emotions sweep you over like a tidal wave.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I highly recommend going for counseling. There's no shame in that. And that's another issue, Lily, and that'll be a whole nother show. Why are we afraid to say, I need help? It's not a weak person that asks for help or realizes they need help. It's a strong person that says, I can't do this on my own. I need help. And I want to share a story. I was working 40 hours a week at the time. It was 5 years ago. Matt was entering more the mid stage, couldn't get dressed by himself. And I had a hard time accepting that and adjusting. And with Alzheimer's, whatever dementia, you always have to be accepting and changing or you're going to go cuckoo. So I didn't realize that I was snapping at the children in the daycare. I didn't realize it, how I was talking to them. I was snapping at Matt, snapping at Josh. Why? Because I felt that I had to be strong, that I had to be the super duper person. And where did it get me? On the verge of a nervous breakdown. And my director called me into her office and she said, Betsy, you need some time off. I'm going to cut your hours down and you need to take some time for you and get yourself together. And I went for therapy. And that really helped. And even people at work saw that when I went for counseling, that it helped. And I wasn't ashamed to say, I'm going for counseling. Not at all. And I'll keep saying it because you, as individuals, you should go. And I want to recommend, Lillian, I don't know if people know this. I know it's the pandemic and places are closed. Call your senior center. Might be called something different where you live. They maybe offering free services. I know mine was, but I live in Woodbridge Township in New Jersey. Go for free counseling. Call them up. Say, do you offer free counseling? Hospice. If you're on hospice,
Yes, they will stay with you for a full year because I get calls every 3 months. How are you doing? I'm fine. Really? And I said, yeah, really. And they said, well, may we ask how you're handling it? And I said, well, I allowed myself to cry myself out thoroughly. And then I got rid of all his stuff. And then I just sat down and had a little talk with myself, saying basically he was in a better place. He wouldn't have survived the coronavirus. His quality of life was shot, so there was no reason why to really fight for his life. And then I know he would have wanted me to go forward with my life and not to hang on to what was, but to go and see what was new out there. And if it included falling in love with another guy, I know he gave me a high thumbs up. He didn't want me to be tied to his love. That to him, that was a waste. And you have to understand, folks, I had a friend in Ohio. She lost her husband and only son during World War II. She never remarried. And right before she passed, she told me, I really regretted not allowing myself to have my own life after blue, 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 and blah, blah, blah died. Because that's not the way to live.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I say, yeah, to each his own. I'm open to meeting somebody. I know I won't get married again. Once was enough for me. Like, you stay at your house, I'll stay at mine. I'm good. But yeah, I'm not closed off to that at all. And I was going to say something, but I lost my train of thought. So I would like to know what people in the audience think. So if anyone's, listening and you want to type in or send comments, I would like to know what you all think. Do you all think it's okay to say to someone to be strong? How do you feel about when someone says that to you?
Sue Fernandez says, good morning.
Hey, Sue. Hi, Sue Fernandez. She's great. She's one of my top guests.
Got 3 people watching. Keep going.
Okay. And I just want to say, Lillian, that as far as children, it's so important to let your children vent. Your heart hurts as a mom to see your children hurting. And I can't grieve for Josh. And I told him that. But I certainly would not tell him to be strong for me. That's too much pressure for a child. Even though Josh is a grown up, he's 36, but still, that's too much pressure for anybody to say. And I talked to a couple of people recently, and one is a woman, and she said that she felt she had to be strong, and she started acting out and had to go for in facility help. And some people need that, and that's okay. One person told me that their son had a complete breakdown and ended up in the facility. Why? They didn't want to show their emotion. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If we were to raise our children, especially boys, to show emotion, to go for help, that it's not weakness, maybe there'd be less suicides among men. Maybe policemen and veterans wouldn't kill themselves because it's looked down upon, especially with men. And mental health issues really need to be addressed, and the stigma has to stop. And I'm not ashamed to say that I suffered with depression as a child. And when I was 16, I went to a social worker. Well, I was called names by certain members of my family, and lo and behold, they went for therapy. So don't throw stones, people, because you don't know what's going to happen to you.
We have Melissa Warhill thanking us for this conversation.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for joining. She liked my show last week.
Good.
Yeah.
You'll get more of this. And if you have any questions, you were so pleased, just type them in and we will ask the guru of grieving.
And just be open communication with your children. because when you stop that communication, and I can't stress this enough, where are they going to go? Who do you want them to go to? Do you want them to go to their friends who will not give good advice? Do you want them to go join a gang to have acceptance, to have their feelings validated? Do you want them to take drugs, turn to alcohol? These are things that happen, people. And
Or beating people up.
yes, and I'm not afraid to talk about those things, Lillian.
Or harming themselves by
Yeah.
taking knives and cutting themselves. Cutting seems to be the best option a lot of these young kids now do, because their pain is so deep that they have to cut themselves to make themselves feel better. Really? Ouch. We
Yes.
have Kuala Maria Kader, and if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, let me know.
Hi, Maria. Maria is one of my friends too.
Okay, well then, see, you should have said you're killing her name, kid.
I can't pronounce her first name right. That's why we call her Maria.
All right, I should have quit while I said.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's a process. I think grieving is just going to be an ongoing process. I may always cry when I go to Matt's cemetery, and Josh might cry. I don't tell him to suck it up. I don't tell him that's enough already. How can I tell him that when I'm crying? And why should I have to be strong in front of my son? Why can't we as parents show our children we're human and have emotions? We're role models for our children's behavior. That's a big shocker to some people.
Yeah, however you behave is how your child is going to behave at your funeral. Think about it.
Yes, yes. And Josh was so sweet. He spoke at Matt's funeral and did a wonderful job. And for those who don't know, Josh has special needs. So for him to stand up in front of people and talk about his dad, that was really amazing. That was really, I was so proud of him. And I know that Matt was proud of him. It's so strange, Lillian, because everyone is different with dementia. Matt knew Joshua's name. Right until he stopped talking, he knew Joshua's name. He called me Booby. He knew I was his booby. But if I asked him what my name is, sometimes he would say Betsy, but he called me Booby. Close enough. It began with a B.
That's right. I mean, Leo, who is now 7, when he goes visit his grandfather's grave, he kneels down and he kisses the granite stone.
Oh, that's sweet. In a way, that's very sweet. You know, I think we need.
Daddy doesn't say you don't do that. That's not manly. He doesn't say that.
Right.
Well, I raised my son from a woman's point of view anyway, but he doesn't say that to Leo. I mean, he allows Leo to grieve his grandfather and what is natural, important, and how he feels. So every time Leo comes, he's always bringing pictures that they laminate or stones or flower or something. He's always leaving something on his grandpa's grave. Always, always. He says, we don't want grandpa to get lonely. I said, no, we don't.
That is really sweet. And that's great that your son is teaching his son that is okay.
Yes.
That it's okay to show emotion. You know, back in, my dad was from World War II era. And in honor of my father, Howard Wurzel, I am my father's daughter. My father was straight up, so am I. So my dad was like, from the time, his era, you had to be strong. If you cried, you were a crybaby.
Yes.
So I, called that. And I always was told I was very sensitive, but later found out, yes, I was ultra sensitive because I'm an empath. And I feel things. I feel things very deeply. And I do get intuitions. And I know some people might be rolling their eyes and saying, okay, Betsy, you're a little cuckoo.
No. Some of my best friends are empaths. That's fine with me. I have no trouble with that.
Yeah, it's true. And I learned it later and I'm discovering more things about being an empath. So I'm welcoming it now, and I don't think that weird anymore. Sometimes, as children, we don't feel like we don't fit in, which I never felt that I fit in.
I
But I
never
found,
fit in then, and I still don't fit in now, and I don't really care. Maria says children have to express their emotions. Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely. And they should be encouraged to. And even now, you still see fathers trying to teach their boys how to be manly and how to be like a man and not be like a girl. What's the biggest difference? Well, girls have empathy, so boys can't. What kind of nonsense is that?
absolutely. I love that, Lillian. It is nonsense, and it has to stop. The suicide rate is very high.
And especially among young children now,
Yes,
as young as second and third grade. I was shocked when I read the stats that these little 7 and 8-year-old kids were committing suicide. I mean, that's Leo's age. When
it's
he
sad.
crawls into my lap and makes himself into a human bullet so he can fit on my lap, and you're going, how can you do that? All those limbs just crunched up, and you can still walk afterwards. But anyway, I mean, it's incredible.
Yes, and what is amazing to me, Lillian, with this pandemic, it's like the light went off of people's heads. I'm hearing now more mental health public service announcements, which I'm glad about. If you need help, they're discovering all of a sudden that isolation causes depression. Hello, we've been
They're
saying that.
just noticing that now?
Yeah, we've been saying that.
Really?
Yes, caregivers have been doing that. Caregivers have been facing isolation and abandonment because when you're a caregiver, you can't just run out the door. You have to plan going out, even out to the grocery store, or getting your hair done. You have to plan that. So even
Absolutely. You have to take them with you wherever you go
or have a sitter.
or have a sitter. And in the end, it's just a lot easier to take them with you.
Yes, if you can.
And if your spouse has a tendency to be a little violent, well, it comes out. They really resent the fact they're angry, and they let you know they're angry.
Yes.
Maria
Yes.
writes, some families feel the kids should not be part of grieving. What do you think? Also, at what age should we let the kids involved in the grieving process?
That's a good question, Maria. I was 9 when my great grandmother died, 9 or 10. I went to her funeral. I didn't really know her, but I was around people that were crying about my great grandma's death. We called her Booby and Bubby. Excuse me, Bubby. That's Jewish for grandma. And we, we went. There was no question. I didn't have a choice. You're going. That's it. I think it depends on the child, but if Josh was young, I would have had him be part of it. Absolutely. I think children should be part of it, especially if their parent is dying. They should be told. Don't tell them that they went to sleep. A lot of people say, oh, they just went to sleep. So what does the kid think? They're going to be afraid to go to sleep. They're be afraid they won't wake up. Let's be honest with our children and let them grieve and take them to grief counseling if they need it. And, it goes back to grief counseling. It will be different with children. Maybe they'll use art therapy instead of talking as to adults would talk. And I think that is part of it. I would definitely would recommend, but see how each child is, because it's up to the child. But I highly recommend, please don't tell your children or grandchildren that their grandparent is sleeping. Let's be honest, because that
Or
child,
they're up in heaven.
yes,
Because that's not an answer to anything.
Yes. Explain them.
Sue says, I totally agree. This is all part of life.
That's right. That's right. Folks, you know what? I'm going to say it straight up. We live, we die, we grieve. Nobody escapes death. That's just a fact. No one escapes it. And everybody is going to grieve at some point because people die and you lose your loved ones. So why don't we just come together and love up on each other? Although now we can't because it's the pandemic, but you could do it virtually and come here on Saturday morning.
At
And
10 o'clock.
at 10 o'clock Eastern time and chat about it, because this has to be out in the open. I don't know, Lillian. I mean, what do you think society's problem is? That
biggest problem? I
Mhm.
think society's biggest problem is fear. And I think fear is part of everything we see, touch, feel, and participate in. So you can say there's a fear to grieving as well. Your fear to be seen to be grieving. Your fear to be seen not reacting the way they do in Hollywood, or maybe the man down the street does it. Everybody grieves in their own manner. Some shed tears, some throw a temper tantrum, some throw dishes. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but everybody has their own way of letting their feelings known. As long as you don't go out, get a gun and kill somebody else, that's not acceptable behavior. But grieving is a personal thing. So I think that is fear first. And I think the second thing is it can't happen to me. Why not? It's happening to everybody else. Don't kid yourself. What, 150,000 people are now have died, and there's over 5 million that are infected with the disease. So don't kid yourself that it's not going to happen to you, or it can happen to you. Look at the people of the bubonic plague. Look for people who died from smallpox or consumption or tuberculosis. Look at all the kids who got affected with polio. They didn't say, dear Mr. or Mrs. Polio, please come and cripple me.
That's right. Very good, Lillian. Absolutely.
Well, I have my moments.
Fear. You're right. It's the fear of the unknown. It's realizing they're realizing their own immortality, that, oh yes, I could die and I could grieve, and I don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with people's grieving. Well, you know what I have to say about that? That's too bad. Really, let people grieve. Listen to them. Don't judge them. Say, well, not me. I'll use me as an example. You can say, Betsy, you know, I don't know how you feel, but you can talk to me. I have people calling me now that are asking me for advice. And I mean, and I love it. I never thought that would happen, but I like that. I like that I can help people. And you know what, folks, instead of being negative on your situation, and I know it's not easy to be positive. I'm not a Pollyanna by any means. Ask yourself, what is this challenge doing for me? And how can I be a better person because of it? Maybe it's to help somebody else.
Maria says, sometimes it's not fear only. It's also feeling shy to express it too. That others will make comments that you need to be a strong man. You should not grieve your dad or mom. What do you think? It's a cultural thing. And that I agree with. It is. You are taught by your parents or grandparents, your aunt and your uncles or your cousins, even your best friends, of what is allowed and how to grieve, because appearance is everything in the States. But I think that you learn it from who's ever around you, and from whatever makes the deepest impression on you. You'll take that as, that's how I should behave. And pay attention when a little kid says, I'm going to be just like my dad. And they are. Or I'm going to be just like my mom. And they will. Why? Because they're imprinting their behavior unto themselves. And they figure it's a safe way to do it. And if they're shy to express it, it's always better to absorb somebody else's pattern of grieving than to stick out from the bunch and show your pattern of grieving. Now, you may disagree with me, Maria, but I know that a lot of people, men, women, kids, watch their eyes, how they may dart around to see if somebody's watching them, or how they're looking, and you're thinking, I mean, it's like the cop saying, well, I could tell just by looking at them that he was going to pull it. So I took my gun out and pistol whipped him ahead of time. Really? That's interesting. Sue said bingo in caps.
Thank you. Yes, Maria, you're absolutely right. I was talking earlier about raising boys up to be compassionate and to be able to express their emotion. I know it's cultural in a lot of cultures. The man, oh, big He-Man, the strong silent type like John Wayne. That doesn't fly anymore in today's society. And we need to reach out to young boys to become compassionate men. To me, I think it's a turn on if a guy is compassionate. That would definitely be something I would be looking for. And
your second edition of life. Maria says they will go through depression and it might lead to suicidal behavior. Exactly. Because they haven't been taught to let it out. I mean, women are told to let it all hang out. And there's a reason for it. Because if we didn't, we take up, well, never mind. But we have to get it out of our systems. It's just healthier.
Yes. I had a discussion with Josh a few years ago. He came down crying. A police officer he knew killed himself. He was on the railroad tracks. Now, I don't know how Josh thinks, but he said to me, Mom, why was he on the railroad tracks? And I said, Josh, because he wanted to kill himself. Why? I don't know why. Only he knows why he did it. And then we had a discussion on depression and suicide. And I told Josh, if he ever felt that way, to please come to me immediately and I will take him for help. So when children start these conversations with you, no matter what their age, listen to them. Don't talk about it to them. Don't say, we don't discuss such things. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Let them talk about it. That's a great conversation piece to, if your child comes up to you and says, why did this person kill themselves? Start talking. We're shocked, aren't we, when famous people kill themselves because they have everything, we think. Oh, this one had millions. Why did they kill themselves? You know why, folks? I'm going to tell you why. One reason, they don't have inner happiness and inner peace. And you can't buy that at the store. That comes from self-work. And it does take work.
They didn't like themselves.
They didn't like themselves. Absolutely.
Well, enough to say, let me go get help. Or maybe they didn't think they were good enough. Or maybe they didn't want to admit it to themselves. I had a friend in high school, and she was shunned as much as I was and was bullied by everybody. And when she graduated from high school, she was involved in a car wreck. And her parents had her put into an insane asylum for observation because they figured she got in the car wreck to kill herself. And she surprised everyone by signing herself in permanently. Now, I'm not recommending that you go and do that because you're abdicating responsibility for yourself. And you really, you give up on yourself. And if you give up on yourself, yeah, you might as well go into the backyard and dig a hole and throw yourself in.
That's right. And I want listeners to know, Lillian, that there is life after caregiving. I used to tease Matt that if I knew I was going to die, I would interview future wives for him because I knew he needed someone to take care of him. I would want him to get remarried again, or meet somebody. I would want him to live his life. I would want Josh to live his life after I'm gone. I want Josh to enjoy life now. After Matt died, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after, Josh said, "Can I go to a hockey game?" I said, "Of course you could go." Some people in some cultures, you can't do any activities for a year. You can't enjoy yourself for a year. I don't believe that. I think life is to be enjoyed. Life is too short. And especially if you saw someone for 10 years or however long suffer, you need to go out and enjoy yourself. You earned that right. Don't let anyone stop you from that.
Maria has a question. Will
Mhm.
not being prepared for the death of loved one in terms of funeral, preparing in advance directive, burdens have an impact on grieving?
Yes, everybody should have advance directive, which will say your wishes, what you would like, how you want to die. Everybody should do it, whether you want a feeding tube, a respirator, a ventilator, however you choose to die. You need to have that down so your children don't fight over that, or if your spouse, disagrees with you. I think people should do pre-arrangements. I did my pre-arrangements this week, a matter of fact. I went. I want Josh to be bothered with that. I updated my living will, and I even had Josh do a living will, even though he's 36. I don't know what could happen. He goes out that door, and I wanted his wishes carried out. And I think that's very important. And when someone dies traumatically, that's a whole different ball game. You had the loss of that person suddenly, and then you had that shock, and then you have to, if you didn't already do arrangements, then you had to do arrangements. And I think that's important. As a matter of fact, when I went to a funeral home, the director said, "Betsy, people don't even know about this. They do seminars." I don't know if they do that now, maybe virtual, but people don't know about pre-arrangements. It's okay to talk about pre-arrangements and do it.
Absolutely. In fact, go to your lawyer and have an estate will drawn up and make sure that all the important questions of who goes what to where, what gets put into charity. I mean, we had all that stuff done years before Barry even became down with Alzheimer. When he went into the hospital, first thing out of the doctor's mouth was, "Do you want me to spare no expense to keep him alive?" "No," because I was his power of attorney. And I said, "It's in our living will to let him go. And I want him to be let go." And even though he disagreed with me, he honored it because it was in writing and it was legal. And did it have an impact on my grieving? Yeah, and made it a lot easier for me to be able to go ahead and do what I needed to do without feeling guilty that I was second guessing my spouse and his wishes. Well, I hate to break this up, but we need to wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen of all and adults of all ages. So, Betsy, close it down. Tell people where they can find you. And remind them again when the next special edition of Grieving is taking place.
Next Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can reach me on my own personal page, Betsy Wurzel, Wurzel. I have a group, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement on Facebook. You could join. And I also have a show on Passion World Talk Radio that I would subscribe to because I have a great guest. And you don't want to miss it. It's on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeart, many places. So, and it is
places.
Many places. And it's free, people.
So far.
So far, yes.
And if you have any questions for me, Lillian Cole, the producer and CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, please email me at lsc@passionateworldtalkradio.com. The website is https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Melissa says, I agree with advance directive and as much advanced planning as possible. Betsy, I was unprepared emotionally and financially, though I was grateful for the advanced directives we did pre-dementia. So thank you all very much for listening. And remember, stay tuned for the next special edition of Grieving.